we're going to talk about these Big Ten Heisman hopefuls, and we're going to kind of make the case for each one of them. So the finalists came out, and there are four guys going to New York. You've got Bryce Young from Alabama, who has been really, really good this year. You've got Kenny Pickett from Pitt, who has been phenomenal as well. You got CJ Stroud, who's the other quarterback who has turned heads as a young player in Ohio State's offense. And you got AIDAN Hutchinson, who is the lone defensive guy who made it to New York, who has been absolutely lights out this year. So make the case for CJ Stroud and why he deserves to win the Heisman.
Well, it's hard because I believe Bryce Young cemented it last week.
I think so too.
And I also believe that if you're going to go off of most valuable player to their team, to their conference, I think Kenny Pickett's probably the pick if that was the case.
I tend to agree with that as well.
But I think CJ got there. I don't think he's going to win it this year, but he got there. I think he matured. He took massive strides throughout the year, and has really set himself to be a front runner next year. And he could leave after next year, right?
Yeah, he can. Bryce Young can
so,
too.
yeah, that's crazy as hell. But I think he's really put himself in a good position on the national level to get back, and do it again. I just love the way he matured. I think he settled in very nicely. Even the games they lost, played very well.
Yes.
Never lost the game for him. It was out of his control. He did everything he could to keep him in it. And I think that machine keeps spitting out guys, and as long as they keep getting receivers to throw to, that creates separation, and Ryan Day's there dialing things up, he's going to have a great chance at it again. So not to be discouraging and not to be, doom and gloom. Like I said, I don't think he's going to win it, but I think he's done a great job of managing the expectations that were put on him in the beginning of the year, which were unfair, managing them and still being able to exceed them in his own way and really do a really fine job of it. And like I said, I'm excited about him moving forward because I think he's a special player.
I echo all of that. I'll throw in, he's third in the nation in yards per attempt. And he's over a yard ahead of either of the other two quarterbacks on there. Would also throw that he's got the best QBR in the nation as well. And if we're getting into the nitty gritty, he played basically 4 games less than a regular season between the game he sat out and some of the blowouts where he only played in a half of the game. And so I think it's been really impressive. The knock on him is the fact that he truly didn't have a Heisman moment. Like, he had that really impressive game against Michigan State where he threw for over 400 yards in the first half of the game. And then against Michigan, he played really well, but it can't be a Heisman moment if your team doesn't win the game. And so I think that really hampered him, because coming out of the Michigan game, he was the betting favorite for this award. And so you mentioned
I'll tell you what, even the Oregon game, dude, I mean, the guy threw 450 yards, right?
Right.
And you can't do anything about he did everything he could.
Yep.
I'm sure he probably looked back at it and was like, dang, I left something out there. Because all great players do. But he did everything he damn well could. And it, like you said, it's just he lacked that staple performance.
Yeah.
And he had 2 opportunities, and unfortunately those opportunities were on opposite ends of the schedule.
Yeah.
But he'll have his chances, and I like I said, I'm very confident in his maturity and his development that he won't disappoint next year.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back next year. And then the other guy we have to make a case for is AIDAN Hutchinson. And I will flat out say there's no chance anybody in there had the stones to give him enough votes that he would win the damn thing. But when you talk about a dominant defensive player, and you talk about a guy who has been a true leader in the heart and soul of a football team, who has elevated, who has exceeded expectations, who has been in territory they haven't been in 2 decades, essentially. He's a huge part of it. And it's really unique because I was talking to somebody who has a Heisman vote, and he said to me that he doesn't think that AIDAN Hutchinson should win the Heisman because he can't impact the game the way a quarterback can. And I said to him, well, then why the hell is this for the best player in America if we're evaluating this from who can impact the game more? And so for AIDAN Hutchinson, I would say the honor of even being in New York as a defensive player is huge. But if there is a guy who has been absolutely dominant at his position, almost head and shoulders above anybody else playing it, this is the name right here.
Yeah. Yeah. He's done. Yeah. He showed up every week. And then there's that element too, that you said he kind of carried the weight of the program on his shoulders as a leader, vocally, spiritually, I think.
Yep.
In a way, you know, the way that he carried out his business and did things. And I agree with you, man. Weirdly enough, and I had Bryce Young not did what he did against Georgia, had they lost that game or something like that, he just kind of limped into New York, and had CJ not had that performance against Michigan State and just kind of, you know, status quo, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and like a pick or something stupid like that, I think there'd be an argument for this year, just because of how crazy this year was. Because when you talk about the Heisman race throughout its entirety this year, there was the middle of the year was just kind of like everyone was waiting for somebody to do something. They were like, come on, man, like someone make a case, someone step up. And that's where you get a guy who, from a defensive standpoint, consistently goes to work every day and then starts showing up and then has his Heisman moments, plays really well in the game, does against Ohio State. He had a chance, but he needed help. And unfortunately, those guys took advantage of it.
Yeah.
But that, like, this year, just how crazy it was. Like, this year was the year where I think you could have made an argument had things played out a little bit differently for a defensive guy to really make some noise and get some votes in there. But to your point, it's just hard because the definition of the Heisman has changed significantly.
It has
throughout the years, just due to the fact that the quarterback position has gotten so much emphasis on it. And I mean, even running backs, like, it's unfair to, I mean, like Kenneth had one bad game and he's done,
right.
You know,
right.
but the year he put together was insane.
It was phenomenal.
So, you know, there's things like that. There's arguments all over the place, but yeah, I mean, Aiden is not going to never not have a meal when he goes to Ann Arbor for the rest of his life, you know? Right. So he's done a hell of a job. And like you said, for him to even be there is a hell of an honor. And, he's a phenomenal football player, really fun to watch, old school.
And I'll say, like, I personally doubted what type of year he was going to have. I did this list in the preseason of returning Big Ten players, and I didn't have him as high as he probably should have been because he was coming off injury. And then they were implementing a new defensive system that I wasn't exactly confident was going to fit his skill set the best. And I was super wrong. And the dude is amazing because he called me out on it on the post game of the Big Ten championship, and he had every right to. But that's kind of been his mentality. He's been a doubted guy. And you can say the same thing for CJ Stroud as a young quarterback coming off the heels of 2 years of Justin Fields. And people didn't think that he was far enough along for a guy who's getting his first starts. The mentality of those two guys to be able to stay the course and to be able to elevate the way that they did this year, I think is the most impressive thing about either one of them. And that's the one thing you can't account for in athletics is when somebody is determined to achieve a certain goal or to hit a certain standard. And both of them did it, man. So it was really impressive to me.
All
right. Well, we'll call this one a show. This was the JP and Hack Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network, Season 1, Episode 16, presented by our partners over at Beverly SportsBook, Joshua Perry, Christian Hackenberg. We'll be back with a few more episodes detailing these bowl games. We're going to get into the matchups. We're going to get into what we're looking for. We're going to dive really hard into the X's and O's. We hope that you will be with us for it. Stay tuned.